The sun was nearly gone when Amara Johnson realized the desert had turned against her. The Arizona sky, once streaked in warm gold, darkened into bruised shades of purple and gray. Her rental Jeep sputtered, coughed, and died miles from the nearest town. For hours, she had followed a dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. Chasing the coordinates of a rare desert herb she was studying for her university's ethnobotany project. Now, all she could hear was the howl of wind and the growl of thunder rolling across the horizon. She stepped out, clutching her satchel of field notes, her curly hair whipping in every direction. A cold gust nearly tore the hat from her head. Rain fell in thick, slanted sheets, sharp and biting as needles. In the distance, flashes of lightning revealed a jagged outline, a mesa rising from the earth like a fortress. Somewhere deep in her instincts, she knew shelter would be there, or nowhere at all. Amara pushed through the storm, boots sinking into wet sand and clay. Each step was a battle against wind and exhaustion. Her flashlight flickered and died, leaving her with only the distant lightning to guide her. Her breath came fast, shallow, the sound drowned in the roar of thunder. She wasn't a woman prone to fear, a black scholar who had traveled through backcountry and forests alone, but this night was different. The desert felt alive, almost watching her. Finally, she spotted it, a stone dwelling tucked beneath the edge of the mesa, half hidden by scrub and shadow. Its doorway was narrow, the interior dark, but it was shelter. She stumbled inside, dripping wet, clutching her arms for warmth. The air smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. A small fire burned low in the hearth, orange embers glowing like eyes in the dimness. And that's when she realized this place wasn't abandoned. From the darkness behind her came the unmistakable sound of movement, slow, deliberate, quiet as a stalking cat. Amara spun around, heart pounding. Standing just beyond the light of the fire was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and silent. His skin held the deep bronze hue of the earth outside, his hair long and bound with a leather cord. The light glinted off the scars on his bare arms. His dark eyes locked on hers, sharp, assessing, unreadable. He didn't speak. Amara swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she began, her voice shaking only slightly. My car broke down. I thought this place was empty. For a moment, the stranger said nothing. Then his voice came deep and controlled, carrying the low thunder of authority. This is Apache land. You shouldn't be here. The words hit her like a warning, not shouted, but heavy with something unspoken. Still, Amara stood her ground. If you want me gone, I'll leave, she said, glancing toward the storm outside. Lightning split the sky in answer, and the rain intensified, pounding the earth in furious rhythm. He watched her for a long moment, then stepped closer to the fire. You can't leave now, he said finally. The mesa kills those who walk it in a storm. She hesitated, uncertain if it was threat or concern. The man, Tazin, turned away, adding wood to the fire. The glow revealed the strong lines of his face, the quiet ferocity in his movements. Amara sank to the ground, exhausted. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of flame and the steady rhythm of rain. The storm raged outside, but inside the small stone shelter, something else began to stir, not safety, not comfort, but a tension that thrummed beneath the surface. In that moment, she realized the danger wasn't only outside in the storm. It stood across from her, tall, wild, and watchful, an Apache man who had already warned her, without saying a word, that nothing about this night would be ordinary. When dawn broke, the desert was a different world. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silver fog that clung to the mesas like ghosts. Amara woke to the crackling sound of a fire being stoked and the faint aroma of roasting meat. Her body ached from sleeping on the stone floor, and when she sat up, Her eyes fell upon Tazin, the Apache warrior from the night before. He was crouched near the fire, bare-chested, his back to her. Every movement he made was deliberate, quiet, precise, like a man who'd learned to survive without sound. His hands, calloused yet steady, turned the meat on a spit he'd fashioned from a mesquite branch. The scars across his shoulders caught the morning light. They weren't random. They told stories of battle, struggle, and endurance. Amara sat silently for a while, studying him, her scientist's curiosity mingling with something far less academic. She had spent her life cataloging plants, not people, but this man seemed carved from the same elements as the land itself. Hard stone. Heat and wind out. When he finally turned, his gaze met hers. Those dark, piercing eyes seemed to weigh everything about her in an instant. Her damp clothes, her notebook, the stubborn lift of her chin. He said nothing for several seconds, then offered her a small piece of meat on a clay plate. "You should eat," he said, his voice calm but firm. Amara hesitated. "Thank you," she replied, taking the food carefully. "You didn't have to." He didn't respond, only returned to tending the fire. For a long while, the only sounds were the wind whispering through the cracks in the stone and the soft hiss of fat dripping into the flames. Finally, she spoke again. "I didn't mean to intrude last night. I didn't know anyone lived out here." "You're far from the road," he said, still not looking at her. "Most who come this way are lost. Or running." His tone made her pause. "Which am I?" she asked. He finally met her eyes again, the faintest flicker of challenge in his expression. "You tell me." Amara shifted under his gaze, unsettled but unwilling to show it. "I'm here for research. I study native herbs, their healing properties. I was told there are species out here that don't grow anywhere else." That earned his first real reaction, a subtle narrowing of his eyes. "You came here to take what doesn't belong to you?" Her brows furrowed. "No, to learn. To document. Knowledge doesn't belong to anyone." Tazin's jaw tightened. "Out here, it does. The land remembers who respects it and who doesn't." The words carried a weight that silenced her for a moment. She realized then that everything about him, the fire, the quiet, the warning, wasn't hostility, but defense. He was guarding something, the land, his past, maybe even himself. As the morning warmed, he left briefly to gather water. Amara followed him outside, drawn by the view. The desert stretched endlessly, glimmering beneath a veil of mist. From the ridge, she could see hawks circling high above and the remnants of ancient carvings etched into the stone walls. Symbols she didn't understand. Tazin noticed her looking. "They tell stories," he said. "Of what came before?" She turned to him. "And what's your story?" He didn't answer. Instead, his hand brushed against a carved symbol near her shoulder. "That one means fire," he said quietly. "It burns without asking permission. Like you." Amara felt her breath catch. "You don't even know me." His gaze dropped to her lips for the briefest moment before he looked away sharply, his control returning like a steel door slamming shut. "You should keep your distance," he said. "You don't understand what it means when I lose mine." Amara frowned, unsure what he meant. "Are you warning me?" He turned toward her then, his voice low, his eyes dark as storm clouds. "Yes, because I can't control myself around you." The air between them went still. The desert held its breath. Amara realized his warning wasn't just about danger, it was about desire, raw and unspoken. And standing there beneath the rising sun, she understood that her real research had only just begun, not into plants or soil, but into the untamed, burning heart of the man before her. The storm lingered over the desert for 2 more days, trapping Amara and Tazin in the small stone dwelling beneath the mesa. The isolation pressed in like the heavy air before rain, intimate and uneasy. The sound of wind whistling through the cracks became their constant companion, a reminder that neither could leave, no matter how much they both seemed to want distance. By the second morning, they had settled into a rhythm born of necessity. Tarzan hunted and gathered. Amara cleaned and wrote. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were precise, meaningful, as if language was something sacred not to be wasted. She, in turn, filled the silence with gentle questions, curious observations, and quiet laughter that sometimes drew the ghost of a smile from him. She learned that he could track animals without footprints, that he could smell rain before it came, that his people believed everything in the desert, rock, wind, flame, had spirit. He learned that she had grown up in a city where people moved too fast and spoke too much, where her intelligence was often questioned, where her skin and confidence made her both visible and invisible in ways that exhausted her. One evening, as the fire burned low, she watched him repair a broken arrowhead by the glow of the flames. His hands moved with grace, but his eyes were far away. "Tarzan," she asked softly, "why do you live out here alone?" His movements stilled. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of fire and the soft hiss of wind outside. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep quiet. "Because men destroy what they don't understand. And I've destroyed enough." Amara tilted her head. "You mean you're hiding?" He looked at her then, a flash of fire in his gaze. "I'm not hiding. I'm remembering." She frowned slightly, but his expression warned her not to push. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. "Remembering what?" He set the arrowhead down slowly. "A mistake." The silence that followed felt heavier than any storm. But Amara didn't back away. She shifted closer, her knees brushing the edge of his woven mat. "You can tell me." Tarzan's jaw flexed, the muscles in his neck taut. "Years ago, a white trader came into our village. He hurt one of our women. I stopped him." His eyes darkened. "But the man was under the government's protection. They sent soldiers. My people feared what would follow. They said I brought the curse upon them, that I'd invited blood for blood." He looked into the flames, his voice breaking into a whisper. "I left before they could exile me. Or worse." Amara felt the weight of his story settle between them like ashes. She reached out, gently touching his arm, a small human gesture that seemed to both steady and unsettle him. "You did what was right," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Right and wrong don't matter when the dead still follow you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Then Amara broke the silence. "Maybe you're not the only one who ran," she said softly. "I left home too, because I wanted peace, but I'm still searching for it." Tarzan turned toward her. For the first time, there was no distance in his gaze, only understanding. "Peace doesn't live in the world," he murmured. "It lives between two people, if they stop fighting it." The words hung between them, warm and dangerous. Amara looked into his eyes, the reflection of the fire dancing in both their faces. For the briefest heartbeat, it felt as if the world outside didn't exist, only this moment. This man, this strange pull she couldn't explain. Then, as if realizing how close they drifted, Tarzan shifted back sharply. His breath came ragged, his control fraying. "You should sleep," he said. His voice rough. Amara watched him turn away, his shoulders tense, his hands gripping the edge of the table like he was holding back something fierce. And in that instant, she understood. His warning wasn't about violence anymore. It was about the desire that had been growing between them, a desire neither of them could name. Yet neither could deny. By the third day, the storm had softened into a misty drizzle, but the tension inside the stone dwelling had only deepened. The air seemed to hum with an invisible charge every time Amara and Tazan shared the same space. They both felt it, the awareness, the restraint, the pull that neither dared acknowledge aloud. Amara spent the morning sketching herbs she'd collected near the mesa, trying to distract herself. But her thoughts kept circling back to him, to the quiet way he moved, the way his voice sounded when he said her name, the fire in his eyes when she had touched him the night before. Tazan, on the other hand, kept his distance. He worked outside, repairing a broken fence and checking traps, but every so often his gaze flicked toward the doorway where she sat. He told himself he was watching for danger, but deep down, he knew it wasn't true. When he finally came back inside, Amara was crouched near the hearth, coaxing the flames higher. The sight of her hands steady, her face lit by firelight, her hair curling damply around her cheeks, struck him harder than he expected. He froze for a moment, caught between instinct and restraint. "You shouldn't sit so close to the fire," he said finally, breaking the silence. "It can turn quick. Burn what it touches." Amara looked up at him, a small knowing smile on her lips. "So can everything worth feeling." Her words hit him like a spark to dry wood. For a heartbeat, he almost stepped forward, almost closed the space between them, but he forced himself to turn away. He busied himself with sharpening his knife. The rhythmic scrape of metal against stone, a thin barrier against his own thoughts, trying to lighten the tension. Amara asked softly, "Tell me something about your people." "Something beautiful." He paused. "Beauty isn't always something you tell," he replied. "Sometimes it's something you protect." She tilted her head. "Then maybe you're protecting too much." The faintest flicker of amusement touched his eyes, but it faded as quickly as it came. "You speak boldly for someone who doesn't understand what she's playing with." She rose, her curiosity overcoming caution. "I'm not playing," she said, stepping closer. "You warned me before that you can't control yourself around me." "What did you mean?" He stood, his full height casting a shadow across her face. "It means I've spent years learning to quiet what's inside me, to be still when everything in me wants to move, to stay calm when the fire wants to burn. You make me forget that." Amara's heart beat faster. "And is that so terrible?" He exhaled slowly, the sound almost like a growl. "For me?" "Yes, because when I stop controlling it, people get hurt." She looked into his eyes, saw the conflict, the fear, the heat all at once. "Then maybe what's hurting you isn't the fire," she said softly. "Maybe it's fighting it." Before he could answer, thunder cracked in the distance, a reminder that the storm wasn't gone, just waiting. The sound broke the fragile moment, but neither moved. They stood inches apart, the air thick with everything unspoken. Then, as if fate wanted to test them, Amara stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. Tazan's reflexes were too quick. He caught her before she fell. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her against him. For an instant, the world narrowed to the sound of their breaths. The heat of his body, the thunder rolling outside, neither spoke. The only language left was the pulse between them, raw, steady, undeniable. But just as suddenly he released her, stepping back as if burned. His chest rose and fell heavily. "You shouldn't touch me," he said hoarsely. "Not again." Amara's voice was steady, but her heart wasn't. "Then stop me." The challenge lingered in the air like lightning that refused to strike. That night, she couldn't sleep. She could hear him by the fire, chanting softly in his native tongue, words she didn't understand but felt in her bones. It wasn't a prayer for strength anymore. It was a plea for control. When he finally turned to meet her gaze across the flickering firelight, his expression was both fierce and fragile. "If you stay near me, I'll forget what I swore to control," he said. Amara's reply came in a whisper that cut through the night. "Then maybe you shouldn't." Before he could respond, A sound shattered the fragile stillness, the distant echo of horses and men's voices carried by the wind. The storm outside had returned, but this time it wasn't made of rain. The night fell heavy, thick with dread. The sound of horses echoed through the canyon, low and rhythmic, too organized to be wild riders. Amara and Tazan froze, exchanging a silent glance that said everything. Whoever these men were, they hadn't come for peace. Tazan's expression hardened, instinct sharpening like the blade he drew from his belt. He moved toward the doorway, his body coiled in readiness. "Stay inside," he said quietly. Amara's heart hammered. "Who are they?" "Bounty men," he muttered. "Soldiers of coin, not honor." His tone was bitter but steady. "They've been hunting me since the day I left the world behind." Lightning split the horizon, revealing silhouettes. 4 men on horseback, rifles slung across their backs. One shouted, his voice carrying through the storm. "Tazan, you can come easy or we can drag you out bleeding. Either way, the price on your head's the same." Amara's stomach turned cold. "Price on your head?" She whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he moved with startling precision, dousing the fire to hide their position, checking the chamber of a worn revolver that looked older than time. His voice came low, fierce, almost animal. "You need to stay down. If they see you, they'll use you to break me." But Amara wasn't built for hiding. She grabbed his wrist before he could step outside. "You don't have to fight them," she urged. "You can talk." His eyes flared. "No. Talking ended years ago when I killed one of theirs." Her breath caught. "The man who hurt that woman?" Tazan nodded once, grimly. "They called it murder. I called it justice." He stepped out into the rain, the door creaking open against the wind. Amara followed to the threshold, her pulse hammering in her ears. She saw him step into the storm, tall, unflinching. Every inch the warrior the earth had shaped. The bounty hunters dismounted, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Their leader, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, smirked. "You've caused the government a lot of trouble, Apache. They want your head on a spike." Tazan said nothing. He simply stood, rain running down his face like war paint. The leader sneered. "What's the matter? Got no words for your executioners?" Then, from the shadows, Amara stepped forward. "He's not going anywhere with you," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the storm. The bounty hunters turned, startled. The leader's grin widened cruelly. Well, you got company, savage. Ain't that something? A fine black woman all the way out here. You plan on sharing her before we hang you?" The words twisted like knives. Tazan's body tensed. The calm snapped out in that instant. The man who had spent years suppressing his fire finally let it burn. He moved with terrifying speed, a blur of motion and sound. The first man went down with a guttural cry, Tazan's blade finding his shoulder. Gunfire cracked through the night, echoing off the mesa walls. Amara dropped to the ground, hands over her ears, watching chaos unfold. Tazan fought like a spirit of vengeance, fluid, feral, unstoppable. The storm became his ally. Lightning illuminated his strikes, thunder drowned the shouts of dying men. 2 hunters fell, one fled into the rain, and the leader, the one with the scar, raised his rifle, aiming for Amara. Without thought, Tazan threw himself in front of her. The shot rang out, and he staggered, blood blooming dark against his side. Rage took her over. She grabbed a fallen man's gun and fired, her trembling hand steady with purpose. The scarred leader collapsed, his weapon slipping from his grasp. Silence returned, broken only by rain and the sound of Tazan's ragged breathing. Amara dropped the gun and rushed to him. "You're bleeding. Oh God, you're—" He caught her wrist weakly, his eyes wild yet gentle. Don't cry, he rasped. I told you what happens when I lose control. Tears mingled with the rain on her face. You saved me. His lips curved faintly, almost a smile. No, he whispered. You saved me. I stopped running because of you. She pressed her hands to his wound, desperate, trembling. Don't talk. I'm not losing you now. He looked at her for a long moment, the fight fading from his eyes, replaced by something softer, a truth that had been building since the first night. You shouldn't have come into my fire, he breathed. But now I can't imagine the desert without you in it. And as the storm eased, Amara held him in her arms, surrounded by blood and sand. Realizing that love, like lightning, was both beautiful and dangerous. It could strike without mercy, but it also brought light to the darkest sky. The storm had passed again, leaving the desert drenched in silence. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and gunpowder. Amara sat by the dying fire, cradling Tazin's head in her lap, her trembling hands pressed against his wound. His breath came shallow but steady, and every exhale was a promise he was still alive. She tore strips from her skirt and bound the wound as best she could. The bullet had grazed his ribs, painful but not fatal. When the bleeding slowed, she sat motionless, staring into the embers, feeling the enormity of what had just happened. Around them lay the bodies of the bounty hunters, soon to be reclaimed by the desert. The fight was over, but something deeper had begun, something neither of them could escape now. When Tazin finally stirred, his eyes opened slowly, their darkness softened by exhaustion. You stayed, he murmured, voice rough as sand. Amara met his gaze, her own eyes red and wet. You think I'd just leave you here to die? He gave a weak, humorless laugh. You should have. I've brought nothing but danger to you. She shook her head, brushing a strand of hair from his face. No, you brought truth. You brought fire, even if it scared me. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt sacred, fragile. Then, with a wince, Tassim tried to sit up and Amara helped him, her hands lingering on his shoulders. You should rest, she said gently. You lost too much blood. He looked at her, eyes searching hers. You don't understand, Amara. If they came once, more will come. Men like that don't stop. The only safety for you is away from me. Her lips trembled, but her voice stayed firm. I don't want safety. Not if it means walking away from you. He stared at her. This woman from a faraway city, this stranger who had wandered into his solitude and changed everything. Why? He whispered. Because peace doesn't come from running, she said softly, echoing his own words from nights before. It comes from choosing where to stand. Something in him broke then, not in pain, but release. The walls he had built, the self-exile he had clung to for years, cracked beneath the weight of her honesty. His hand rose shakily to her cheek, rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. You're not meant for this place, he said. The world will never understand a woman like you or a man like me. Amara smiled faintly, tears still glistening in her lashes. Then let the world misunderstand. The words hung between them like prayer. Slowly, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched, a gesture of reverence, not conquest. The firelight painted their faces in gold and shadow. Two souls burned and remade by the same flame. When morning came, the desert was washed clean. The air was cool, the sky pale and endless. Tazin stood with effort, his arm still bandaged, and looked out over the horizon. Amara stood beside him, quiet but resolute. What will you do now? She asked. He took a deep breath. I'll stop hiding, he said simply. There's a village 3 days south, my people's kin. Maybe it's time I stopped running from ghosts. She nodded, though her heart ached. And me? He turned to her, eyes dark and tender. You go where your spirit leads. If it's back to your world, I'll understand. Amara stepped closer, her hand finding his. What if my spirit leads here? He didn't answer in words. He only pulled her into his arms, holding her against him as the desert wind stirred the sand around their feet. For the first time in years, he felt the land breathe again, not with sorrow, but with life. As the sun rose higher, casting light across the red mesas, Tazan whispered, almost to himself, "You were the storm that saved me." Amara smiled, resting her head against his chest. "And you," she said softly, "were the fire that healed me." They stood there, two wanderers bound not by destiny but by choice, the warrior who had forgotten how to feel, and the woman who taught him that even the wildest fires could bring warmth instead of ruin. And as the wind carried the last scent of rain away, the desert was no longer silent. It sang, a low, endless hum of life, forgiveness, and the kind of love that could never truly die.